Right, so another form that we use frequently is something called standard form. So standard form is written in the form ax plus by equals c. So it looks different than our y equals mx plus b, right? But a, b, and c are just numbers. They're just coefficients, is what a and b are coefficients, and c is a constant. All that means is a, b, and c are just regular numbers. So if we look at number 1, you see how a would be 2 because it's next to the x. B would be 1 because there's nothing there in front of the y, which just means it's a 1. And C here would be 3. So A is always the 1 in front of the x, B is the 1 in front of the y, and C is the 1 all by itself on the other side of the equation. And so in this one, we're going to write each equation in slope-intercept form. And then we're going to identify the slope and y-intercept. So slope-intercept form, remember, is y equals mx plus b. That's what slope-intercept form is. So we're trying to get it in that form. So that just means we're going to get y by itself. So I'm going to highlight the y here because I know I need to get that by itself. And I'm going to move the x term over. That's always the first step. So if there's an x term next to the y, we need to move it over. So we're going to subtract 2x to both sides. That way this completely cancels out. And then we have y equals negative 2x plus 3. I put the negative 2x first because in this form, we need to get the x term before the b term. So instead of writing 3 minus 2x up here, I just wrote negative 2x plus 3. So I put the x term first. So that's my answer. That's in slope-intercept, y equals negative 2x plus 3. And then it says to identify the slope and the y-intercept. So remember, slope is always m, and that's the one next to the x. And my b is my y-intercept, which is 3. Okay, number 2. So we're trying to get the y alone here. So I'm going to highlight that. Again, the first step is always moving the x term over. So I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. And then that cancels out, and I have 5y equals. And then I'm going to put the x term first. And then my last step is to divide. So do you see how the 5 is next to the y? That's multiplication. So in order to get it to the other side, or to get the y alone, we have to divide 5 to the other side. So we're going to divide by 5. And notice how I'm dividing 5 to everything. So y equals negative 4 over 5x, and negative 30 divided by 5 is negative 6. Now my slope, my m, is negative 4 over 5, and my b, my y-intercept, is negative 6. Okay, so if we look at number 3, I'm trying to get y alone here. So the first step always is move x over. So I'm going to subtract x because that's a positive x. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. And I have negative 3y equals, I'm going to put the x term first, so negative x, and I'm going to put the b term at the end, so positive 12. And then I'm going to divide by negative 3. That's my last step because I need y alone. So I'm going to divide by negative 3 to every piece. Because when we divide and multiply, we have to divide it and multiply it to everything on both sides of the equation. Now, look at negative x over negative 3 right there. If we have two negatives next to each other, whether it be multiplication or division, remember that turns into a positive. So I'm going to change this into x over 3. And then 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. So that's our equation here. When we identify the slope is going to be, so notice here, this is actually a 1 in front of that x, right? So my slope here is 1/3. It's 1/3 because the slope that's next to the x right here is a fraction. It's 1 over 3. And then my y-intercept, my b, is negative 4. Okay, number 4, I'm trying to get that y alone, so I'm going to subtract x first from both sides. That cancels out. I have negative y equals, I'm going to put the x term first, so negative x minus 8. And then the y is not by itself yet because it has that negative in front of it. So that's like the same thing as saying a negative 1, right? So we're going to divide by negative 1. And remember, we divide by negative 1 to everything. So we have y equals, and that just changes the signs. So it's a positive x now, and it's a positive 8. And then our slope is a 1. The number in front of the x is 1. And our y-intercept is 8. Okay, number 5, we're trying to get that y alone. So always move the x term over first, so minus 4x from both sides. And then 0 minus 4x is just negative 4x. So we have negative y equals negative 4x. And then again, we have a negative 1 in front of this y, so we're going to divide by negative 1. So we have y equals, and now it's a positive 4x. That's my equation. My slope is the number in front of the x, so it's 4. And y-intercept, remember when there's nothing at the end, it's just 0. Okay, number 6. We're trying to get that y by itself. So the first step is subtract 3x. And that cancels out, so we have negative 2y equals, and we're going to put the x term first. So negative 3x minus 14. And then we're going to divide by negative 2 to each piece. So y equals, again, when we have a negative over a negative like that, that just turns into a positive. So it's a positive 3 over 2. We can't simplify 3 over 2, so we're just going to leave it. And then negative 14 divided by a negative 2 is a positive 7. So our m, our slope is 3/2, and our b is 7. Okay, number 7, we're going to get y alone again. So we always subtract the x term, or add it. In this case, we're actually going to add it. So plus 6x to both sides. So we're going to move that to the other side. And then we have 4y equals, we're going to put the x term first, 6x plus 20. And then our last step to get the y here by itself is to divide by 4. So we're doing the same thing every time. Move the x term over and then we're divide. So y equals, and then I can simplify 6 over 4 by dividing by 2. So it's 3 over 2 when I divide by 2. X plus 5. 20 divided by 4 is 5. So my m, my slope, is 3 over 2, and my b is 5. All right, number 8. So we're going to get the y by itself. So here we subtract x from both sides. And then we have 5y equals negative x minus 15. And then the last step here is to divide by 5 to everything. So y equals negative x over 5 minus 3, because negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3. And then when we identify the slope, remember there's a 1 here in front of this x. So that is not a negative 5, it's a negative 1/5. It's a fraction. So my slope is negative 1/5, and my b, my y-intercept, is negative 3. All right, almost done. We have 4 more. And I know this is so repetitive, but it's a good thing because, like I said before, truly, my Algebra 2 students, this is really difficult for them. So hopefully with all this practice, when you get there, it will be easy for you. So we're going to move the 3x over. And then we have 3y equals negative 3x minus 12. We put the x term first, and then divide by 3 to everything. So we have y equals, and then negative 3 divided by 3 is a negative 1, and negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. So my slope, my m, is negative 1, and my b, my y-intercept, is negative 4. So here we're going to, for number 10, we're going to add 2x. And these notes are online too. If you need to review any of this, it's on Canvas for you guys under today's date. So you can go ahead and look back at this if you need to go over this again. or the other notes as well. So we're going to divide by -4 to everything. That cancels out, and we have y equals. This simplifies to -1/2 x minus 9. And then our slope here, m, equals -1/2, and our b is -9. Okay, number 11. We're going to subtract 12x from both sides. And then we have -9y equals -12x minus 9. And then we're going to divide by -9. So y equals, now this fraction, again, a negative over a negative is a positive, so I know it's going to be positive. And then we can simplify by 3. So if we divide the top by 3, it's 4. If we divide the bottom by 3, it's 3. And then -9 divided by -9 is a +1. So my slope is 4/3, and my y-intercept is 1. And then last one, here we're going to subtract 4x from both sides. And we have 10y equals -4x plus 10. And then we're going to divide by 10. So y equals, and then we simplify this by dividing by 2 for this -4/10 here. We can divide the top and bottom by 2, so -4 divided by 2 is -2, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. We put an x at the end, and then 10 divided by 10 is a +1. So our slope is -2/5, and our b is 1. Okay, so I need you guys to write a summary about what you learned in this lesson, and you can even write about how it differs from how standard form differs from slope-intercept form, or about the steps you take, or anything like that. Don't forget to write the summary because you do get points for this. So write the summary before you move on to anything else.